Lord, my mind feels like a carousel that won't stop spinning today. Thoughts circle endlessly, each one catching on the next, creating a storm that drowns out your still, small voice. The weight of overthinking has become so familiar that I almost forget what peace feels like. In this sacred moment, I bring you my racing thoughts, my midnight worries, and the mental exhaustion that follows me like a shadow. Your word promises that, when anxiety was great within me, your consolation brought joy to my soul. Psalm 94 verse 19, and I'm reaching for that consolation now. These thought patterns have built invisible prisons around me. I analyze conversations from weeks ago, rehearse scenarios that haven't happened, and create detailed worries about tomorrow before today has even finished. My mind feels like a horse that's broken free from its rider, galloping wildly across dangerous terrain. I'm grasping for the reins, but control slips through my fingers like water. Remind me that you are the ultimate horse whisperer of my anxious thoughts, capable of bringing calm to what seems untamable. The exhaustion of overthinking seeps into every area of my life. When I should be present with my family, my mind is elsewhere, solving problems that may never exist. When I should be sleeping, I'm mentally rewriting conversations or planning responses to criticism that hasn't come. When I should be enjoying simple pleasures, I'm analyzing what others think or questioning my own decisions. This mental hamster wheel has stolen too much of my joy, too many precious moments I can never reclaim. I confess that sometimes my overthinking feels like a form of control. If I can just think through every possibility, prepare for every scenario, analyze every angle, then perhaps I can protect myself from surprise, disappointment, or failure. Yet this illusion of control is actually a heavy chain. The more I overthink, the less I truly live in the freedom you promised. The more I analyze, the less I trust. The more I worry, the less I worship. Today, I choose to release my white-knuckled grip on these mental patterns. Your word tells us to take every thought captive, 2 Corinthians 10 verse 5, but I've allowed my thoughts to take me captive instead. They've led me down dark corridors of what-ifs and endless spirals of uncertainty. When one worry resolves, another quickly takes its place, as though my mind cannot tolerate the empty space where anxiety once lived. Break this cycle, Lord. Teach me to recognize these patterns before they gain momentum. Show me how to interrupt anxiety's familiar rhythm with the counter-melody of your truth. I imagine your hand gently taking the reins of my runaway thoughts. Like a skilled rider who knows exactly how much pressure to apply, you don't yank or force, but firmly redirect. When anxiety was great within me, your consolation brought joy to my soul. Your consolation, that gentle comfort that comes not from absence of trouble but from presence of the Comforter. I need that consolation now, that supernatural joy that makes no sense to the overthinking mind but perfect sense to the trusting heart. The spiral of overthinking often begins with one small worry that grows as I feed it with attention. A comment from a colleague becomes evidence that everyone dislikes me. A minor mistake magnifies into proof of complete inadequacy. A physical symptom transforms into worst-case medical scenarios. Before I realize what's happening, that single worry has multiplied like yeast in dough, expanding to fill every available space in my consciousness. Teach me to recognize these entry points of anxiety before they gain territory in my mind. In moments of clarity, I see how overthinking has become almost automatic. A default setting rather than an occasional struggle. What began as a desire to be thorough and responsible has morphed into a habit that steals my peace. The line between thoughtful consideration and harmful rumination has blurred. Reset my mental patterns, Lord. Rebuild the pathways in my mind that lead to trust rather than tortured analysis. Help me distinguish between productive problem-solving and the endless loops of overthinking. When I consider the hours, no days and weeks, I've lost to overthinking, I feel grief for the time wasted and the joy forfeited. The mental energy poured into scenarios that never materialized. The sleep sacrificed on the altar of midnight worry. The present moments missed while my mind wandered through labyrinths of what-ifs. I surrender this grief to you, asking that even this loss might be redeemed. Transform my experience into compassion for others caught in similar mental prisons. Sometimes the overthinking feels so natural that I've mistaken it for part of my identity. I'm just an overthinker, I tell myself, as though this pattern is hardwired and unchangeable. But you, the creator who formed my mind, never designed it for torment but for soundness, clarity, and peace. You promise that I have the mind of Christ, 1 Corinthians 2 verse 16. Not a mind bent on self-torture through endless analysis, but a mind capable of supernatural rest even in challenging circumstances. For those watching who recognize the same battle with overthinking, there's an ebook called Don't Think, Trust and Surrender, available in the pinned comment below. It offers practical wisdom for breaking free from thought patterns that keep you trapped in anxiety. While these spiritual resources can provide significant help, remember that professional support is also valuable for persistent overthinking that affects your daily functioning. I'm learning that overthinking often masquerades as responsibility, as though worrying about my loved ones somehow protects them. The weight of carrying everything and everyone in my thoughts has become unbearable. Today I visualize myself literally loosening my grip on these mental reins, surrendering each person and situation into your infinitely more capable hands. When the urge to reclaim control arises, and it will, remind me that your care for them far exceeds my anxious planning. The physical toll of overthinking is undeniable. The tension headaches that start at the base of my skull. The tight chest that makes deep breathing impossible. The churning stomach that can't settle enough for proper nourishment. The bone-deep fatigue that no amount of sleep seems to touch. My body bears witness to the truth that overthinking is not merely a mental habit but a whole person affliction. As I release these thought patterns, bring healing to my physical body that has carried this stress for too long. When overwhelmed by racing thoughts, I often feel isolated in my struggle, convinced that others move through life with easy confidence while I'm paralyzed by analysis. But your word reminds me that anxiety is a universal human experience. Even great heroes of faith experience troubled minds. David crying out from cave hideouts, Elijah under his broom tree, Paul with his thorn. I am not alone in this battle, and there is no shame in acknowledging how difficult the fight can be. I'm realizing that overthinking often stems from a fundamental belief that I am ultimately responsible for outcomes. That if something goes wrong, it must be because I didn't think it through carefully enough. This crushing responsibility was never meant to be mine. You ask me to be faithful, not omniscient. To be diligent, not omnipotent. To trust, not control. Today I consciously transfer this burden of perfect foreknowledge and control back to the only one qualified to carry it. Overthinking thrives in the soil of perfectionism, where anything less than ideal becomes evidence of failure. I've held myself to impossible standards, then punished myself with relentless mental review when I inevitably fall short. Your grace offers a different way. Not lowered standards, but loving acceptance that makes growth possible without shame. Help me embrace my humanity with all its limitations and learning curves, trusting that your strength is made perfect in my weakness. 2 Corinthians 12 verse 9. The comparison trap fuels my overthinking, as I measure my unfiltered reality against others' curated presentations. Social media becomes a catalog of evidence that everyone else has figured out what eludes me. In quiet honesty, I acknowledge how these comparisons inflame my tendency to overthink. Remind me that behind every polished image lies a complex human story not unlike my own, complete with struggles, doubts, and yes, overthinking that never makes it to the public square. When my mind races through worst-case scenarios, help me remember your track record of faithfulness. The financial crisis I was certain would destroy us, yet somehow we found our way through. The health scare that consumed my thoughts for weeks, resolved by your grace. The relationship I was convinced was irreparably damaged, gradually restored through patience and honesty. Rehearsing your faithfulness provides a counter-narrative to anxiety's persistent whispers of doom. I've noticed that my overthinking intensifies in seasons of transition and uncertainty, precisely when I most need mental clarity and peace. The irony isn't lost on me. When life feels unsteady, I grasp for control through exhaustive analysis, Yet this very habit clouds my judgment and drains the energy I need to navigate change wisely. In these shifting seasons, teach me to anchor to your unchanging character rather than flailing for control through overthinking. There's a particular flavor of overthinking that haunts me at night, when defenses are low and fears loom large. Thoughts that seemed manageable in daylight transform into monsters in darkness. When anxiety was great within me, your consolation brought joy to my soul. I need that consolation especially in nighttime hours, when imagination runs wild and proportion is lost. Let your word be the last voice I hear before sleep. Your promise is the guard at the door of my dreaming mind. I confess that my overthinking sometimes serves as a barrier between us. When I'm caught in mental spirals, prayer becomes mechanical, Bible reading becomes another task, and your presence feels distant. It's as though the static of my racing thoughts drowns out the frequency of your voice. Create in me a quietness that makes space for genuine connection, not by demanding perfect mental discipline, but by inviting me into a relationship that transcends my thought patterns. The language I use often reveals and reinforces my tendency to overthink. What if scenarios? I should have regrets. I'm afraid that projections. These verbal pathways have worn deep grooves in my mind through repetition. Transform my internal dialogue, Lord. When anxiety whispers, what if disaster strikes? Teach me to answer, even then, God is with me. When regret moans, if only I had done things differently, help me respond, grace covers even this. Let your truth rewrite my mental scripts. Overthinking creates a peculiar loneliness, as I'm physically present but mentally absent from my own life and relationships. I miss meaningful connections because I'm rehearsing conversations instead of having them, analyzing motives instead of extending trust, preparing for disappointment instead of receiving joy. Draw me back to the present moment, where real life happens and where you are always waiting to meet me. Let me taste the sweetness of being fully present, mind and body in the same place. I recognize that some of my overthinking stems from wounds and traumas that taught me hypervigilance was necessary for survival. What began as a protective mechanism has outlived its usefulness, continuing to operate long after the original danger passed. With compassion for the part of me that learned to overthink as self-protection, I ask for healing of these deeper wounds. As security grows, may hypervigilance gradually release its grip on my thought patterns. In the midst of overthinking, I often forget that anxiety is not just a mental health issue but a spiritual battleground. The enemy knows that a mind consumed with worry has little space for worship, that anxious thoughts drown out your voice, that mental exhaustion weakens spiritual resilience. I recognize these attacks for what they are and stand firm in the knowledge that you have given me power, love, and a sound mind. 2 Timothy 1 verse 7. This battlefield belongs to you. When I consider Jesus' words about worry, his gentle questions about which of us can add a single hour to our lives by worrying, Matthew 6 verse 27, I feel both convicted and comforted. The one who bore the weight of the world never engaged in unproductive overthinking. He moved with perfect confidence in his Father's care, perfect presence in each moment, perfect peace even facing the cross. This mind of Christ is available to me through your Spirit, not as a distant ideal but as my inheritance. The imagery of letting go of the reins resonates deeply with my struggle. So often I approach prayer with white-knuckled grip still firmly on my concerns, asking you to bless my tight control rather than truly surrendering it. Today, I physically open my clenched hands as a symbol of mental release. I imagine literally placing the reins of each overthought situation into your capable hands, trusting your direction even when the path ahead isn't visible to me. There is a peace that surpasses understanding, a calm that makes no logical sense in the face of legitimate concerns. I've tasted this peace in glimpses, brief moments when trust overcame anxiety and my racing mind finally quieted. These weren't moments when all problems disappeared, but rather when your presence became more real than my problems. Expand these islands of peace into continents, these moments into seasons, until overthinking no longer dominates my mental landscape. As I prepare to close this prayer time, I commit to practical steps that support this mental freedom. limiting media that triggers comparison and anxiety, creating space for silence and stillness each day, speaking truth out loud when overthinking begins its familiar spiral, reaching out for support rather than suffering alone in my head, celebrating small victories when I choose trust over tortured analysis. These practices aren't meant to earn your help but to cooperate with the freedom you're already working in me. Lord, when anxiety was great within me, your consolation brought joy to my soul. Not just temporary relief or momentary distraction, but genuine joy, that deep-seated gladness that can coexist with difficult circumstances because it's rooted in who you are rather than what I face. I receive that consolation now, allowing it to touch the places where overthinking has created furrows of worry. Smooth these troubled waters with your perfect peace that passes understanding. I release the mental habit of overthinking, not through perfect discipline or flawless technique, but through humble surrender to the one who loves me completely. When worry creeps back in, and it will, remind me that freedom is not about perfect mental performance but about returning again and again to the truth. You hold all things together, including my fragile mind with its tendencies toward anxiety. In this knowledge I find rest, not just for my thoughts but for my whole being. If this prayer has touched your heart and you found a moment of relief from overthinking, please share it with someone who might be caught in similar thought patterns. Sometimes the greatest gift we can offer each other is the reminder that we aren't alone in our struggles, and that a path to freedom exists, one surrendered thought at a time.